What's going on? My name's Imani, and welcome to my class. Today we're going to talk about basic camera operation. Let's find out the type of cameras that are out there and the best ways to use them. The first type of camera we're going to talk about is one that I'm pretty sure you're familiar with. It's the photo style of camera. You may see stuff like DSLR, SLR, mirrorless. These are digital cameras that were originally created for photos, but over time they got video functionality, and now they are the low-cost alternative to shooting video productions. When searching for the right kind of these cameras, there are a couple things you need to look at. The first thing is the record quality. One of the factors of record quality is bitrate, just how photos are taken and they measure their quality in megapixels. When video is recorded, you want to measure your quality in megabytes. When you search for cameras, you can see the megabytes of the file size they record. When you look for a camera and you look up the specs and you look at the quality of the files, generally speaking, under 100 megabytes is lower quality. 100 megabytes or above is higher quality recording. And you'll see that a lot of these cameras record in a range of different formats. Things like MP4, MOV, AVCHD, H.264, RAW. There's a whole science behind all these formats. And also, more importantly, how do you edit them once you record them? If you'd like to know more about that, please leave a comment below. But for now, let's just keep an eye on the bitrate. As you'll notice, the higher the bitrate of the files, typically the more expensive the camera. After bitrate is resolution. Those are the dimensions of the file. That's when you get into HD files and 4K files. And even now, they're going all the way up to 6 and 8K. Let me break down exactly what that means. HD is a standard for many things like televisions, so you've probably heard 720p or 1080p. 4K has become the standard for higher quality videos, and some TVs too. You may hear things like UHD or full 4K. You can look up the actual dimensions for yourself, but the rule of thumb is that, just like bitrate, the higher the resolution, the higher the quality. But it's not that simple. You need a combination of high bitrate and high resolution. For instance, if you have a 4K camera with low bitrate, it may not be high quality. So keep that in mind when you're looking up a camera. Look at the bitrate of the files and the resolution and see what fits your budget. After bitrate, we want to look at something called sensor size. Since these are digital cameras, the sensor takes all the light coming in through the camera and converts it into digital information. It also determines the coverage area of the scene coming into the camera. All that means is that the bigger the sensor, the more light coming in and the bigger the coverage area. The largest sensor size, generally for video, is called full frame. But there are plenty other sensors out there that may be smaller, and they have different names such as APS-C, APS-H, Micro Four Thirds. You may have heard of these. Make sure you let me know if you want a deeper breakdown of these different sensors. What that means for you is that, on average, full frame cameras are usually more expensive. But don't worry, these smaller sensor cameras have been working really hard to give you a comparable quality image. And they do this with a lot of camera software. Since these are digital cameras, they're almost like small computers. This software is being constantly upgraded so that the cameras give you better quality images. Now that you know about record quality, let's talk about lenses, because they control a lot of what actually comes into the camera. So it doesn't matter if you have a high quality recording, if you have a low quality lens. There are two primary types of lenses: zoom lenses and prime lenses. Zoom lens you may be familiar with, where you can punch in and out to an image. Prime lenses don't move, they stay in one spot. And those spots are measured in millimeters. You may see that a 10mm lens, a 15mm lens, a 100mm lens. What that actually is the distance from the internal lens to the sensor in millimeters. But what that means for you is how far the camera sees. For instance, a 10mm lens would allow you to see a lot that's close up, while a 100mm lens will allow you to focus on something that's very far away. A very important thing to consider when looking for a lens is what's called aperture. Aperture determines how much light actually goes through the lens into your camera. And this is measured in what's called f-stops. You may see this when you look at a lens. It says f1.2 or f4. All you need to know is that the lower the f-stop number, the more light comes into the lens. And with more light coming to the lens, you have a lot more dynamic range to do things like blur out backgrounds or shoot in dark light environments. With that being said, you can imagine that the lower the f-stop, typically the more expensive the lens. There's also specialty lenses out there that do different things. For instance, a wide-angle lens will allow you to see an entire landscape, while a telephoto lens would allow you to focus in on a subject and pull it out of the background. Let me know if you want a breakdown of how you can use these special lenses to create the looks that you're looking for. There are other things that may affect the cost of a lens, like does it have the option to autofocus? Is there a servo function, which allows you to zoom in and out with the push of a button? And also they have special lenses with grooves in them. If you're shooting a movie, that way you can slowly dial in the focus or the aperture. And let's be honest, some lenses are just better quality. Some companies have been mastering this art for a long time, and their lenses are coveted in the film industry. The good news is that you can buy some of these smaller, low-cost cameras, get yourself a nice lens, and create a really great image. The bad news is that if you're shooting video, there are some downsides, because they weren't originally designed to do that. For instance, a lot of them suffer when capturing audio or monitoring audio. They're also very small and work with a digital interface that can be hard to use. Most of the time, people have to get some type of external monitoring or recording system. And there's also an issue with things like battery life and the camera overheating because it's so small. What ends up happening is that most people build what's called cages, where they add all of these attachments that give the camera the functionalities that it's missing. Then all of a sudden, a once inexpensive camera becomes a very expensive investment. That's why we have something called camcorders. These are cameras specifically made for video, and there are different kinds of camcorders. The one you may be thinking of are the consumer brands, the ones that fit in the palm of your hand. Oftentimes, these cameras have less quality than the photo format cameras, and most of them have a fixed lens, so you can't swap out the lens to something you prefer. But the upside is that all of those video features are installed, so you can record audio, monitor audio, have a nice battery life, not worry about overheating. What happens is, if you're serious about video, you'll step up from a consumer-grade camcorder to a pro camcorder. These camcorders have comparable quality to those DSLRs and SLRs. A lot of them are much bigger, even to the point where you can mount them on your shoulder. You can see a lot of these in TV productions and in documentaries where people are moving around different environments. Just like the photo cams, these have interchangeable lenses, and since the body's bigger, people usually opt for the bigger lenses as well. This is when you get into pro territory, when you're spending tens of thousands of dollars just on lenses, or you opt to rent them because they're so expensive. And that's when we end up at the cinema cameras, the things they shoot movies on. You may have heard of some of these, stuff like Red and Alexa. These are the highest quality recording cameras. And just like those photo cameras, they're also modular. They're systems that you have to put together piece by piece. Each one of those cameras deserves its own breakdown. So let me know if you want to know more in the comments below. Oh, I almost forgot. There's some specialty cameras out there. Things like drones, GoPros, and even your phone. They all have their place and use, which brings me to my next point. There's no one-size-fits-all camera. All cameras have pros and cons, so it's more about what are you trying to accomplish with the camera and what type of shoot do you want to produce. But there's one thing that every single camera in this video have in common, is that the basic functions are all the same. When you use a camera, you want to make sure that the image is in focus, that the exposure is correct, meaning it's not too bright, it's not too dark, and in many cases, you want to make sure that the colors look right, so that something doesn't look too blue or orange. That's called white balance. No matter what camera you use, if you master those three, you'll be on your way in your professional career. So, if you'd like to learn the best practices for focus, exposure, and white balance, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next video. Thank you for taking my class. I'll see you next time.